So recently I realised that the transition onto a new realm that I made a little while back was going to need to be completed if I was going to continue to make gold. That is because my server is not low pop anymore, quite frankly it's just dead. And I have a nice wide array of everything that you can possibly try and make gold selling, and shy of things like current endgame mats for crafting, I am just not receiving any sales whatsoever, or the odd thing here and there, and it's just not going to be sufficient for sustaining myself. And as a result, I found myself in a position where I needed to level a large number of characters on this new realm. And that was quite a daunting task, because I don't know if any of you have leveled a character recently, but it is quite a grindy process, particularly just because of the fact that you've got a long way to go from 1 to 120. Now, obviously, you don't have to get all the way to the max level in order to be able to use the character for gold farming, and if you are starting with an allied race, then you are going to start at level 20. But even with those ends cut off, as it were, it's still a very long journey from 20 to, say, 110 for your Legion Legendaries to be using for a farming character. So I have been looking for fast ways of leveling, as well as easy ways of leveling. Something that I could do while I sat there and watched Netflix. And I'm happy to say that that is what I found and made this video on today, so let's dive in. So this method is going to be using the pet battling system, or as I like to call it, WoW Pokemon. Now, with WoW Pokemon, you essentially engage in battles with wild pets using the pets of your own, and completing the battle does acquire you some experience. Now, the reason that this isn't considered to be a mainstream way of leveling is because of the fact that these pets are very sparse, and you also need to be fighting pets of appropriate levels in the appropriate level zones in order to gain the right amounts of experience, and it just becomes logistically too difficult to be efficient when compared to things like questing and just mob grinding or dungeon grinding. But there is a location that I'm showing you here today in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. I'll pop the map up here for you now, and at this location there is a very high spawn rate of pet battles to engage in that are almost entirely of the same type of pet that you will be fighting against. Now, if you don't understand that last statement, by the type of pet I mean that all pets have a typing, be it that they are a flying pet, a mechanical pet, a dragon pet, things of that nature. And in a rock paper scissors style format, everything is strong against one thing and weak against another. So when everything that you are fighting is of the same type, it's very easy to get a team in advance that can just plow straight through that type and just easily win these battles in very quick time. Now, I was reasonably poorly set up for this. I don't have any of the optimal pets to use for this method, but I did have things that were strong against the types of pets that I were fighting. The pets that you're going to be fighting here are going to be almost entirely aquatic pets, and as a result most flying pets or anything with flying attacks is going to be pretty strong against it, and I did have some things that I could use for that purpose. But they were far from the optimal pets. Ideally you would have something with some self-sustain built into it, so you wouldn't have to heal in between fights, you could just continually roll out these attacks and kill the mobs. You are going to be fighting the Golden Civets and Golden Civet Kitten fights, which, like I said, are against aquatic creatures, so your pet would need to be strong against aquatic types with that self-sustain. But if you were to acquire something like that, you could just go from fight to fight, mowing down these mobs and getting your experience. As for the experience, at low levels that you see most of this footage for, I start at around level 7 and grind my way up to level 15 doing this, and it takes very little time whatsoever. Depending on your level, when I started I was getting about 3 fights in per level, so about 33% of a bar of experience per fight, and gradually over time this does decrease. This method does work in principle all the way to the max level, so you could just do this all the way to max. However, it does start to get very slow as you get high levels, so do bear that in mind. I do actually have footage here for you where I am using a level 104 character, and I get about 3% for the battle. Now, that is not actually as terrible as it sounds, because the next point we're going to talk about is the fact that these battles are incredibly quick. On average, it was taking me sub 2 minutes per fight, on occasion only about 1 minute per fight in order to complete these fights. So when you are at low level and you are getting 30% give or take per fight, that of course means you can do a level in 6 minutes, and that is fantastic. Now of course these low levels are quite easy to level by any other method, but the big thing that was the selling point for leveling like this is the fact that you can do it completely brain dead looking somewhere else. If you have a mouse like me that has buttons that are configurable on it, then you can of course bind these so that you don't even need two hands. You can just use your ability to click your mouse buttons to move your character, and then press the buttons during the fight to press the appropriate attacks to kill the Pokemon. Sorry, pets. Now, the footage that you are seeing here is recorded while I was doing many other things, and I was putting in practically no effort. So the methods that I'm using in fighting, you may see if you're not putting in the brain power, you will fight suboptimally, make poor decisions in your choice of attacks, but ultimately, if you're using the right pets, it's not going to slow you down too greatly. And the final optimal point about this farm that I like is the fact that you can do this while you are in the queues for battlegrounds and dungeons, which are my preferred method of leveling, especially the former, and it doesn't actually hinder you in any way. So a lot of the time when I'm leveling characters, I want to do it through battlegrounds. I'll often find myself killing time between battlegrounds, maybe doing the odd quest or two, but mostly I'm going to be out just gathering, trying to make a bit of gold on the character or something, because I just don't want to quest anymore. And that is obviously downtime and it's not very efficient, but doing this in between the farms is going to be much more efficient. Now it's time for the negatives. Of course we have to discuss the downsides of doing this. Like we already hinted at, when you get to a high level it does slow down dramatically, but it's still pretty decent, especially as far as completely and utterly no effort leveling goes. Secondly, getting here on a low level character can be a little bit challenging. By far the best method I have found is to have a mage friend open a portal for your low level character, take you to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and then use a 2-person mount to fly your character there. With this method it's incredibly easy and takes about a minute, but if you don't have access to a mage friend it could be quite difficult to get here. Chances are you're probably going to have to pay for that same service from somebody in trade chat. And the final negative is of course the fact that if you aren't big on pet battling, you may not have the appropriate pets to partake. Now, this is quite lenient in terms of what you need. As you see here, as I mentioned before, I am not using the optimal pets. But if you're using anything that's strong against aquatic type creatures and is blue or green quality and roughly level 23 or higher, because they'll level from doing this, then that will probably do you just fine. Obviously, the stronger pets you have, the more easily you're going to be able to recover between battles and just stomp through the fights. But anything that is flying type and 23 and above ish is probably going to be sufficient to get you started. If you don't have anything like that, it can be a little bit grindy to acquire yourself something, unless of course you went and purchased something off of the auction house. But of course, if you have a lot of gold and you just need to level these characters, or you want to get into pet battling, that is an option for you. And the final thing to mention is that there is a legendary pet that is nearby to this farm called Nono, and that is what you need to think when it comes to fighting it. Fighting Nono is going to most likely result in your demise, as unless you have a very strong team in order to partake in the fight and you know what you are doing, he will absolutely annihilate you. And also, if you do manage to defeat Nono, there is very little experience benefit for you. I have been told this, I haven't yet confirmed it, as the fight is far too difficult for me, as I do not have the appropriate pets or knowledge or care to gather it in order to be able to complete the fight, so I just leave him sitting there. It's of no detriment to you to do so. But that's going to about do it for today's video, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider liking the video, and if you want to be kept up to date, please do also consider subscribing to the channel. But that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.